clear understanding of what was wrong with their response. The White House in 2020 was not led by a man I respected or trusted. At the outset, that hadn't deterred me. After all, the color of your t-shirt shouldn't matter during a global pandemic. But this was the White House of Donald J. Trump, a man whose ego wouldn't allow him to acknowledge a problem like the novel coronavirus emerging on his watch. All the things he would have needed to do, beginning with taking accountability, managing a large-scale response, calling for unity, and relying on experts and institutions of science, were anathema to him. Still, I tried. I contacted Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, to offer my assistance, and spent the year on the push and pull of an effort to save lives and prevent even more colossal mistakes. Despite a few successes, when it came to dealing with the White House, I generally found myself fighting the forces of denial, blame, and a short attention span that only blew more life into the pandemic. I put more energy into working with governors, mayors, private companies, and scientists, anyone who needed help or could lend a hand. I also began to publicly document what I was seeing every day, not just for myself, but for the public, in a nightly Twitter tweet storm and in national publications that became a mainstay for many Americans seeking insight into what was happening. I made frequent TV appearances and started a podcast with my bright but bored 18-year-old son, Zach. My views were not formed by what I read in the paper, but from regular conversations with medical providers on the front lines and a whole host of people who would become principal players during the pandemic. People inside the Trump world like Anthony Fauci, Deborah Birx, and Kushner. Governors in a dozen states, leading pandemic and scientific experts, and organizations that were central, or at least should have been, to defeating the pandemic. I also began to write this book, which I came to call Preventable. This is a story full of missed opportunities, willful neglect, and indifference and denial from our president. But the country's experience during the pandemic is also a culmination of many of the things that had begun to distort our society for a number of years. Gross inequality based on race and income, the growing distrust of expertise, a media addicted to promoting controversy, and a people long out of the habit of shared sacrifice for the common good. So many Americans did not have to die. Some of our mistakes could have been avoided had we had a different and better leader. Others were more deeply rooted in our American identity. Those are more challenging to address and maybe even more important to fix as we move forward. This book is not meant to be full of sage commentary and policy prescriptions. Instead, it follows the stories of some of the key people and events at the center of the crisis. Once you see what I saw, I think the lessons will emerge pretty much on their own. The solutions, well, that's another matter. A few weeks after wrapping up the book, sometime between Christmas and New Year's Day, I received a call from the Biden team asking me to join the White House to help lead the pandemic response in the new administration. The crisis was raging, and the newly authorized vaccine rollout was in trouble. Meanwhile, the normal transition of government was being hobbled by Trump's refusal to acknowledge the election results and his attempt to overturn them. Given the gravity of the challenge, I decided to say yes. It wasn't the first time I had been asked to help the country through a dire situation with an uncertain outcome. A quick digression will help explain how I came to be involved in this story. In many ways, my career has been dominated by a series of blind leaps of faith. In 1998, I was 5 years out of Harvard Business School, newly married, and leading a charmed existence. In January, however, my college roommate and close friend, Jeff Yurkovsky, began experiencing numbness in his arm. We were both 31. He was soon diagnosed with inoperable brain cancer. 5 months later, on July 2nd, he passed away, leaving behind not just his friends, but his young wife, Lynn,